So again, I am very honored to welcome you to the keynote address with the city of Bogota, the winner of the 2022 STA. We'll hear a special address delivered by the Mayor Claudia Lopez Hernandez. And before that, we'll hear some welcoming remarks from Nora Peña, head of the Mobilize program, followed by the CEO of ITDP, Heather Thompson. And finally, we'll hand it off to the session moderator, Veronica Ortiz Cisneros, the head of communications at ITDP.
Welcome to Mobilize 2022 virtual series. My name is Nora Peña, the head of the Mobilize program. In this series, we celebrate our Sustainable Transport Award winner, Bogotá, Colombia. We have two great sessions featuring an inspiring keynote by the Mayor of Bogotá and a live technical webinar with the City of Bogotá scheduled for October 5th. We will wrap up the Mobilize virtual series with a session on communities of care, spotlighting cities that are taking charge in creating inclusion and accessibility. And if you haven't already, please take a moment to view our honorable mentions, Tartu, Estonia, and Peshawar, Pakistan, which were showcased earlier this year. You can find the webinars on YouTube, and you can download the case studies on itdp.org. Now I would like to invite Heather Thompson, the CEO of ITDP, to share some opening remarks. Heather.
It gives me great pleasure to have with us today Mayor Claudia Lopez of Bogotá. Elected to this position in October 2019, she is the first woman to hold this office. Since her election, Mayor Lopez has taken a strong initiative to create a development plan that addresses social and environmental challenges in the city. As mayor, she has pushed for sustainable mobility that serves the needs of all people. She has actively promoted gender equity and inclusive access by developing land use plans, infrastructure, and policy measures that support better access to health and care services, including for senior citizens and people with disabilities. This builds upon many steps over the years to prioritize public transportation and cycling in the city. Bogotá is known for the building of the Transmilenio bus rapid transit system, which earned it the success of the Sustainable Transport Award more than a decade ago. The city has continued to build upon the foundation with more investment in public transit, including a growing fleet of electric buses. In particular, during the pandemic, Bogotá was one of the leading cities to prioritize bicycle travel with more dedicated protected lanes to help alleviate pressure on public transit and avoid an increase in congestion from cars, as many cities are experiencing today. I had the fortune of traveling to Bogotá some years ago and was so inspired by what the city had accomplished and the leaders that made it happen. I hope to return again soon to see all the more recent improvements and once again be inspired by the current leadership. I had the pleasure of meeting Mayor Lopez a few months ago in New York City during the time of the United Nations General Assembly on Road Safety. Mayor Lopez helped carry the flag to make the case for greater investment in better planning and road design to prioritize safety and access for all people, including women, which she has made a pillar of her work as mayor. Upon meeting Mayor Lopez, one cannot help but notice her passion and clarity of vision for what she cares about, making the city of Bogotá a better place with more sustainable, equitable transportation for all. I am especially excited for the Mobilize virtual series to feature the city of Bogotá and for the opportunity to learn firsthand from decision makers like Mayor Lopez herself. Again, congratulations to the city of Bogotá for winning this year's Sustainable Transport Award. Thank you for all that you have done to make your city a more livable place and for inspiring cities across the world.
Thank you, Heather, for your words. And good afternoon, good evening, almost good morning to everyone. My name is Veronica Ortiz. I'm the Global Communications Director at ITDP. As Heather mentioned, Bogotá won its first award in 2005 for its work on Transmilenio and the cycle work expansion. Importantly, despite the many challenges involved, Bogotá maintained its steady course towards sustainable, compact city development throughout the years and throughout different political terms. It only shows that it is possible to deliver long-term vision in a world where different events can take a different toll on a city. As Heather mentioned, Bogotá has excelled in the recent years in many aspects. I want to highlight how gender needs have been articulated through a gender plan to help increase safety and equity for women. Blocks of Care, the program fostered by Mayor Lopez, seeks to help low-income women reach the essential services they need for their income and everyday routines. Climate change goals are also being tapped into the bus fleet electrification and programs that curb use of personal vehicles. I also had the great fortune and honor to meet Mayor Lopez last April. It was very clear to me how much she understands how cities need to change towards a more sustainable vision and do it fast to address the climate and equity challenges we face in the world. It is my utmost pleasure to welcome Mayor Claudia Lopez to deliver the keynote address and share highlights and lessons about Bogotá's transformation. Hand it over to you, Mayor Lopez.
Well, yes, it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for such a kind and generous introduction. You're so generous not only with Bogotá, that you have awarded twice a well-deserved prize, but also with me. I appreciate it pretty much. It's a great pleasure to be with your long audience around the world to speak of a topic that I think is a passion, not only a topic, not only a job, not only an issue, but a passion for all of us, which is to work through transportation, through clean, sustainable, equitable public transportation to make our cities a better place to live, a better place to create. I think Bogotá deserves perfectly this award, both times. In 2005, there was a time during the end of the 1990s, Bogotá, led by former Mayor Enrique Peñalosa, did a huge challenge. We didn't even have a public transportation system by the end of the 1990s. We have a lot of buses, but each driver was the owner of his own company. Its bus was a company. We don't have a proper organization. We don't have a system. We don't have dedicated lanes. We didn't have a public enterprise that was actually in charge of organizing the public transportation system. So Mayor Enrique Peñalosa actually built a public transportation system, organized it, organized the infrastructure, built the first dedicated lines, decided that the city has to move from this chaotic thousands and thousands of buses and drivers in a disorganized manner, and to have a public entity, which is Transmilenio, our public transportation institution, to organize actually a public transportation system with dedicated lines for BTRs, bus transit rapid systems, which was by the time a huge improvement in the city. Both Mayor Peñalosa and Mayor Mocus, who was actually the ones who followed Mayor Peñalosa in 2003, I guess, promoted the use of bike lines, dedicated bike lines in our city. Probably one of the most important innovations in Bogotá's history more than 40 years ago is that we decided to close at the beginning like 50 kilometers. Now there are almost 400 kilometers of streets, of public streets during Sundays, just to enjoy walking, to enjoy biking. It's a tradition for every Sunday in Bogotá since 4 years ago. It's known as the ciclovia. And now, then we have, let me share some presentation with you here to mention this history of Bogota. And then, you know, we did such a huge improvement at the beginning of the 1990s. And then almost until 2010, I will say, we continued in a decade improving pedestrian space, public space, improving the BTR system, Transmilenio, improving the cycleway system. And then, unfortunately, there was a time, I will say here, from 2012 to 2018, we have a series of unfortunate successes. I mean, like we have a very corrupt government from 2011. We stopped planning and building the dedicated lanes for new Transmilenio dedicated lanes. We started a huge debate to build the metro. We didn't have a metro. We still don't have a metro. Could you imagine a city of 10 million people without a metro? Of course, our congestion is enormous. And we sort of waste almost a decade between 2010 to 2018, I will say, in political debates. And we are suffering now the price of wasting almost 8 years of improvements. But then Mayor Peñalosa came back for a second term. He was elected. And he decided to restart, you know, improving Transmilenio. Unfortunately, because we didn't build enough BRTs as it was planned, you know, at the end of the 1990s, because we didn't build the first metro line. So our Transmilenio system was supposed to carry around 25% of the public transportation demand. But by 2017, it was carrying almost 40%, almost twice it was built for. So unfortunately, Transmilenio suffered for a huge discontent on people who loved it at the beginning of the 2000s, almost hated Transmilenio by 2017. Because we didn't have enough Transmilenio, because we overused our system, you know, we were asking too much. And even his own creator, unfortunately, Mayor Enrique Peñalosa, pushed this idea that Transmilenio was just as good as a metro, that it could do almost the same that a metro, but cheaper. And it is technically impossible for a BTR system to replace a metro. In any of your cities, in New York or any of the cities that are listening to this presentation, you know, we need to have multimodal public transportation systems, right? We need sidewalks, we need cycleways, we need highways, we need metro, we need regional trains to connect metropolitan areas, we need cables, and yes, we also need BRTs, but we cannot replace metros and all of the multimodal system just with buses. Even if they are dedicated, you know, it's impossible. And it's impossible if you are 10 million people surrounded and spread in a metropolitan area. So finally, I think in 2008, you know, 18 maybe, finally we were able to agree to build the first metro line in Bogota. It was contracted out in 2019 and is at the moment in construction for like 20% of advance in the public works of the construction of the first metro line. We're also building at this moment the first metropolitan regional train. It's called Regio Tram de Occidente. We are building alongside with the governor of Cundinamarca, which is our sort of a state that is surrounding Bogota. Bogota had one cable connecting a very popular area in the mountains. For those of you who have been in Bogota, you know that Bogota is a big city over a plateau surrounded by beautiful mountains. But those beautiful mountains are in some part, you know, forest and environmental reserves, but in many other parts are just popular neighborhoods, working families, even poor working families, who need to be connected through cables, electric cables, that connect them easily to the BTR system of Transmilenio, and by 2028 with Metro. So I will say we have this sort of innovation in public transportation in the first, from 1998 to 2010. And then we have this sort of bad period of time between 2010 and 2017. And then we push back again. And we are now, and I think the reason we sort of win this award again is because by 2022, we have a clear plan. By first time in history, in Bogota's history, we agree with the national government, with the state government of Cundinamarca and Bogota, agreed on a 40-year plan, in which we know that we're gonna build, let me go a little bit ahead in the presentation, right here, in which we agree what we're gonna do, you know. We know that from here to 2027, we're gonna, you know, build the first metro line. We're gonna contract out the second metro line. We're gonna build 3 more cables. We're gonna build 3 green corridors. Now we call green corridors for a good reason, the BRT lanes that we're gonna build from Transmilenio. We're gonna expand from 593 kilometers of cycleways up to 800 kilometers. And we know what we're gonna do from 2028 to 2035, and then we go what we're gonna do until 2050. So I think we already have a vision, we have a plan. We are no longer in the political sabotage, on the political debate. You know, this is a technical debate. It's not an ideological debate. Public transportation is not ideological. I can think of something more practical, you know, that connecting people, clean and sustainable and cheaper and equitable, to provide them a decent living, you know, small period of time, good clean air, so that people can spend the rest of their lives moving around and most of their lives, you know, enjoying with their families, caring for their own families, for the kids, improving their education, working better, innovating, instead of, you know, wasting time just in congestion and in pollution. So this is one reason, and we were able to achieve this in 2021, this long-term plan. Now, as we all know, let me come back here in this part of the presentation. We have this challenge, you know, this challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was a huge challenge, but it was also a huge opportunity for the city. We were able to do in a year, like 3 different implementations and innovations in Bogota's public transportation that we weren't able to do in 20. For example, in just 1 year, we added 84 new kilometers of temporary bike lanes in the main avenues, you know. As we were able to take away space from polluted cars to clean bikes. And that was a huge improvement. I mean, we did in a year the number of kilometers of dedicated bike lanes that we did in 10. That was a huge improvement. We were able also to start our shared bike system. That was something incredible. I mean, 800,000 people use bikes every day in Bogota to go to a study and to go to work, right? But we didn't have a public transportation, a public bike share system, you know. Two previous governments tried, and unfortunately, there was no financial closing. We couldn't find the financial balance to provide this service. And people who come to the city, who visit the city, who come from different places, who come from other countries, and they would love to use and to bike around Bogota, if they can find public bikes and sharing bikes. So that's another thing that the pandemic time brought to Bogota that was very important. In this month, we are starting the public share bike system of Bogota, consisting in 3,300 bikes, half of them assisted electric bikes. 150 of them are bikes for handicapped people. 150 bikes have baskets, to move different things around, Of course, you have dogs for kids and other stuff. We have 300 dog stations for bikes. So this is another good thing that we were able to do in the last 2 years. We were able also to agree in a public policy to continue improving biking in Bogota. We agree with civil society, with biking organizations, with youth organizations, with community, for a 15-year plan to continue improving biking in Bogota. And our goal is by 2030, the year in which we're going to celebrate the achievement of the SDGs, of the Sustainable Development Goals in Bogota in 2030 and in the world. We're going to celebrate that Bogota is no longer having 800 kilometers of dedicated bike lanes. We're going to have 1,000. And we're going to, achieve that more than 1 million trips and 1 million people move daily in bikes in Bogota. That's our goal for 2030. And you can be sure we're going to achieve it. Also, we were able to set up a plan for gender inclusion. That's especially important for me. As Heather, remember, I'm the first woman. You can be sure I'm not going to be the last one, but I'm the first woman to be elected as mayor of Bogota. And 65%, 2 out of 3 of users of public transportation are women, are working women, are caregivers, are women who are unpaid, who do unpaid care work, who have an overburden of care work. They care for kids, they care for people with disabilities in their families, but they care for elders, but they care alone. So the cares of the block cares in Bogota are a way to connect more clean and accessible public transportation. We want to get as close to these women's homes. And also we want to connect them not only with work, but also with social services of care, in which we, the mayor office, assume we take care for those they are caring for. We take care of the kids. We take care of the elders. We take care of the people with disabilities so that women can rest, can have time for themselves, for their own study, for their own work, for income generation, for opportunities. If we don't connect care services with public transportation, 1 million women will remain under poverty in Bogota. That's unacceptable. We're not going to build a better city if we don't liberate, we don't free this potential of women. So connecting Bogota's caring system for women with clean transportation has been one of our challenges, and we're achieving them. We already have 11 care blocks in Bogota in different cities, in different parts of the city. At this moment, we have the largest electric fleet of any city outside China, almost 1,500 electric buses. We have the largest electric, ¿cómo se dice? Patio. We have the largest electric, bus station.
Yards, like
yards, exactly. Yards in Bogota. The largest electric care in Bogota is in Bogota. The largest electric fleet in Latin America is in Bogota, in a very poor neighborhood. So that's what I'm saying, connecting public transportation clean, because it's in electric buses or the public bike share system, or the BRT system connecting the entire city, of course, but especially and particularly connecting the block cares for women in Bogota. So that's a perspective that we brought here. That's one of the things that has been especially remarked by ITDP in this year's award. And we celebrate that because we think this is a challenge, this is a gender's perspective. You know, there's gotta be a difference. It's not only symbolic. There gotta be an actual, real difference of women leading a city. And that's what we brought here, and we are very proud of it. We are also at this moment. The good news, as I mentioned to my citizens every day, you know, Bogota has the worst traffic ever, you know. It has an enormous congestion and pollution because we basically depend on buses and cars. Now we're building the metro. Now we're building 3 cables more, you know. Now we're building 1 regional electric train. But as you could imagine, we have 500 public works fronts in the city. So that's even a challenge, you know. We're going to be doing these public works for a decade. So it does even more challenging, you know, the traffic and moving around the city is even more challenging. So we are promoting at this moment sharing, you know, like I'm trying to give this explanation to my people, and if you can give me, you know, advice of how to do it better, I will appreciate it. I'm trying to explain to them, look, we don't have enough public space for transportation at the moment. But on top of that, we are doing the structural solution, which is building the metro, building the regional train, building the cables, doing more BTRs, green corridors. But it's gonna take 10 years to build it. And in the meantime, we're gonna have even more challenging traffic precisely because of the public works. So it doesn't make sense to have unutilized seats, either in the public transportation or in the cars. I mean, if you're gonna use the car, use it fully. You know, you have 5 seats in your car. Go with your kids, go with your co-workers, go with your neighbors. It doesn't make sense to go alone in a car. It doesn't make sense that we have 25% of the seats in Transmilenio, which are not being used at the moment. I mean, it doesn't make sense. They're just occupying space and not moving around anyone. So it's going to be more challenging. So we're trying to promote this sharing transportation, either public or private, but use it fully. You know, don't leave an empty seat in either private or public transportation because it doesn't make sense. So we have all sort of incentives. There is a measure in Bogotá with there is some times of some days in which you can use your car, some days in which you cannot use your car. We are promoting, you know, the use of bikes and stuff because, I mean, there's going to be 10 years of quite a challenge. And, you know, by 2032, this is going to be another city, you know, a really much more sustainable and well-connected city. But the decade is going to be challenging. And another thing is Transmilenio, and this has been one of the criticisms to Transmilenio, which I think has a little bit of reason, which is we have a public enterprise, which is Transmilenio, but we actually do public concessions. So there are private operators, you know, who organize the dedicated bike lanes. We build the dedicated bike lanes, but they are privately operated concessions. So we contract out a private operator. They buy the buses, they hire the drivers, and they organize the routes. But there is no public operator. There is no public operator. So, for example, we have the challenge that 2 out of the 10 private operators were broken. So you could imagine if 2 zones in the city suddenly cannot have public transportation because the private operator got broken. It's an enormous risk. So we learned the lesson and said, well, we will try to build a mixed. It's public. We're going to have a public operator of transportation. It's called La Rolita. Bogotanos are called Rolos in Colombia. So we decided to use this nickname of La Rolita. It's going to be a public operator of transportation. Only will have public buses, electric buses. We're going to manage 9 routes. And it will be the first public transportation, to the best of my knowledge, in the world, which is gender equal. Half of the drivers, half of the managing team will be women, and half will be men. So it not only will be electric, it not only will be public operator, it will gender equal public operator in transportation, which is a very man-driven sector. So that's another landmark of Bogota at this moment that we're very proud of it. It will start operating in just a couple of weeks here in Bogota. So please cross your fingers. It's a huge innovation in all sense. We hope it's going to work better or well, and people will appreciate it. So we'll see. We'll see. That's another thing. This already mentioned. I already mentioned this, which is the long-term plan. Long-term plan. So the long-term plan, I just let's see, a month ago, we were able to reach an agreement with the national government, who has, by law, the national government has to provide 70% of the funding to build public transportation, any mode of public transportation. So we were proposing the second metro line. I mean, it took us 40 years of discussion to do the first metro line. So I tell people, look, if we're going to spend 40 years for each metro line, we're not going to, do this in this era. So we were able to agree on the second metro line, to do the studies, the engineering, technical studies, and to agree on the funding for the second metro line in 2.5 years. I mean, 2.5 years, we did what took 40 years for the first metro line. We agree the route, we agree that it's going to be a subway, it's going to have, so let me show you here, maybe you see, if I can point it out here. Let's see if I can point it out here to show you something. I don't know how to do it. Anyway, maybe in red in the map, you see a little arc like this, red. So half of it is the first metro line, which is 24 kilometers and 16 stations. And the other half of it, connecting the north part of the city, is the second metro line, which is going to be 15 kilometers and 11 stations more. The second thing that we just have elections, national elections, and we have a new national government since a month ago. So we were able already to agree with the new national government that we're going to contract out next year the second regional train. As you could see here in the map, maybe you see that outside the city there is a blue lane. That's the first regional train. It's called Regiotran de Occidente. Now we're going to agree to fund and to start next year the second regional train, which is connecting the North metropolitan region outside the city with the center of the city. That's going to be a huge and enormous improvement also. And also, we are now, out of the 500 public works fronts that we have now, we are improving all the main routes that connect the metropolitan area with the city itself. We have 6 different routes that connect the metropolitan area with the city. But all these routes were built, like 50 years ago. And since then, the population of the metropolitan region has multiplied by 5. So you could imagine what it takes to go, to the outskirts of Bogota in Chía al norte, or in Suacha al sur, or, in Facatativá to the west. I mean, a trip that should take an hour is taking 3 hours. Because literally, there are 10 times the number of cars. There are 5 times the number of people with the same mixed lanes that we have 50 years ago. So at this moment, we are improving and building more mixed lanes in all the entrance, in 5 out of the 6 entrances of Bogota. That's another part that we're doing. So it's a huge work. It hasn't been, there is, of course, an enormous debate daily, welcome to be mayor. You will be daily dealing with mobility issues, with traffic congestion issues, and with security issues, regardless of what you do, regardless of what you do. This is a challenge for any big city. And I will mention that another innovation that we're going to start building actually next year is what we call green corridors. So we're going to go from 2005 BRT's, big star of Bogotá's, and now the big star of 2022 award to Bogotá is not only the metro, not only La Rolita, not only the bike lanes, but the green corridor. So let me finish trying to explain the concept. So let's think about Robert Moses, the big promoters of cars and avenues in the 20th century. Avenues for cars are the landmark of 20th century cities, no doubt about it, for good and for bad, but they were the landmark. They occupy, for example, in Bogota, 85% of the public space for transportation is occupied by cars, private cars. But cars only do and move 50% of daily trips. It's quite it's a huge inequity of distribution of public space for transportation. But on top of that, the more you do, the more congestion you have. I mean, it doesn't solve anything. We learned that throughout the 20th century. And on top of that, now we have the climate change here. So it's not only traffic, it's not only congestion, it's pollution. Because cars are moved by fossil fuels. So we can afford to do that. It's irrational. From the mobility point of view, it's irrational from the environmental point of view. And it's irrational from the social point of view. At least in the case of Bogota. It's not in the United States that most of the families have a car. No, only 20% of families in Bogota has a car. Only 50% of the trips are done by cars. So public transportation is actually the majority of the people. So green corridors if avenues for cars were the landmark of 20th century cities, we're trying to promote the idea that green corridors should be one of the landmarks of cities in the 21st century. So this is, again, the public space for transportation. So what we have now is 85% of the space will be for cars. No. In a green corridor, the space will be distributed in a correspondence to the actual mode of use, first. Second, we're going to privilege the cleanest modes of transportation, right? And we're going to remember that we humans are not the only inhabitants of cities, Nature is always with us, Animals, birds are also with us. So a green corridor is a corridor that, first of all, allows the green ecosystemic connection, right? That's the first element, how the clean air moves, how the birds moves, you know, how the bees moves, how the nature, you know, needs to connect. The ecosystemic connection is the first element to build a green corridor. Then clean, sustainable modes of transportation, and then proportion between space and the mode of transportation. So the first green corridor that we're building is in the most important, most emblematic avenue of the city is La Séptima, La Carrera Séptima. The 7th Avenue in Bogotá is the more emblematic avenue in our city. So we're transforming the 7th Avenue from an avenue to a green corridor. So let me explain you what it means. 24% of trips along the 7th Avenue are done by pedestrians, walking. But today, Avenue provides pedestrians only with 4% of the public space. In the green corridor in the 7th Avenue, pedestrians will have 25% of the public space. Public transportation carries 20%, 25% of trips along the Séptima, but they only have now 10 to 12% of the space. In the green corridor, they will occupy 18 to 20, almost the proportion of trips with the proportion of public space. There were no, when I came to the mayor's office, La Carrera Séptima, the 7th Avenue, didn't have bike lane, didn't have, but they have bike trips. It's just that they didn't have the proper space. Now we will have bike lanes in both directions over the Séptima. That's the difference between having a 20th century avenue and to build a 21st century green corridor. And we include that not only in our mobility plan, in our long-term mobility plan that I mentioned before, but we include that as an territorial planning, urban planning criteria in our urban master development plan, in our land use plan, which is the long-term territorial plan for the city. So we are matching the territorial, the urban planning criteria with the mobility plan. And I think that's another reasons why we won this year's award. And we are very, not only, of course, excited, but we think this is relevant not only for Bogotá. I mean, doing this matching of green corridors instead of avenues, including, a mobility plan that has gender perspective, that has environmental ecosystemic perspective, that redistribute in a more equitable and sustainable form public space. I mean, this is not a challenge for Bogotá. This is a challenge for Lima. This is a challenge for Mexico. This is a challenge for New York. Today I was with my dear friend, the mayor of Denver. I mean, this is a challenge for everywhere, but it's not easy. It takes courage. It takes political courage to do this. In not every city to do this kind of policies and improvements and changes is quite popular. It's the correct thing to do, but it's not always the popular thing to do. So having not only the technical support, but the political courage to do this, I think that's another reason why Bogotá has been recognized twice for this ITDP's award. And I'm very honored personally. And of course, as my city, I want to thank ITDP for taking too much support and love to Bogotá. Thank you so much. We love it. We appreciate it. We always need it. And we hope to honor the confidence, the generosity that ITDP has had with Bogotá. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you, Mayor Lopez. It is such a pleasure to hear from you and also an inspiration to hear what Bogotá has done and your future plans. So we only have time for one question. So I'm trying to choose wisely and strategically too. So I'm gonna go with this one, which is something that, you know, I'm picking up from something you just said. You mentioned courage, and you know, most obviously certain of the needs of change, and you face that with incredible passion. So I'm gonna go with how did you find that courage? Because as you said, a lot of unpopular changes need to be done, and you have prioritized things that for us are very obvious, just like care, in a way no other city has, and you know, made all these links with other institutions and stakeholders. So how do you find the courage, the political courage, the technical resources are there, but the political courage, and what lessons would you share with other cities so they can make that tough, bold, hard, unpopular decisions? If you could end with that inspiring notes.
Well, you know, you have to be elected, but in the case of Bogota, sort of my assessment was, look, in a very unequal society, such as Bogota and Colombia, and in general, Latin American cities and countries, you know, there are elites, you know, upper income persons and families who are the most influential. But they are the minority. I mean, they are 20%. You know, I have nothing against. I'm glad they provide jobs, they create entrepreneurship. I appreciate what they do. But it's unsustainable for their own families and for the other 80% of the families to use 85% of a public space, which is a public thing. It's not a private thing. You know, it's not the lane in your house. It's the lane in your city. So the courage came from a simple thing. You know, I might not be I might not be a very influential person in my city, in politics or in the media, but I'm sure I belong to the majority of my city. You know, 8 out of 10 families are more similar to me than to the elites, are more similar to the people who uses public transportation than to the people who use car. You know, 1 million women, 65% of users, daily users of public transportation are women and are caregivers and are, you know, poor women. I mean, we are the majority. I gotta let them know that we could do better. We all could do better. Because the one who is in a car, in an avenue, is not having a good life either. You know, to spend 3 hours a day in a car, just moving around, that's not a good life, period. You may have income, you may have influence, you may have power, but you're not having a good life. At least not in the public transportation issue. I mean, at least not in the public space, really. And also, I think the climate change era, the climate emergency, changed the conversation. It says, look, this is not only, it's not irrational, I mean, it's a matter of survival, really. We're not gonna make it up to the next generation. Our kids is not gonna have, there is no planet B, as the kid says, you know. So I think climate change changed the conversation, forced anybody to be more rational, more empathic, and to have more courage, to do deep changes in their habits of life, personal and public. So I think the context, the global context helps. And at least in my country and in my city, it was like the majority, which is the fundamental the basis of any democracy, we are not serving the majority of the people with the transportation policy that we had in Bogota. We have wasted a decade. I mean, we did very well from 1995 to 2010, very well. That's why we were awarded the 2005 award. But then we almost lost a decade. We're paying a huge price. And that was sort of my speech and my proposal in the 2019 campaign. Look, we were able to work together before. We had a plan, we did improvements. We did sacrifices, but we did improvements. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Now we have more reasons and more good reasons to do it. So I think those were the sources of, it requires courage, but it requires also the conviction that if you have the passions enough, the pedagogic, resources enough, the technical support have been always there. I mean, you guys, ITDP has been always be there. The technical support is there. The technical knowledge is there. It was much more a political challenge, a political narrative, a pedagogic educational narrative to explain everybody that we will be worse off if we don't do deep changes. I guess that was the case in Bogotá, Luis.
Thank you so much, Mayor Claudia. I think, yes, find the courage in the conviction of what the priorities are right now. And in long-term plans, in long-term vision is exactly what we need. So thank you so much for your words, for your presentation. Thank you also, Heather Thompson, for being here with us, taking the time to share your words and knowledge with all of us, and thank you also all of you who joined today, for taking the time to watch. It is an honor to have you, Mayor Claudia. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And don't forget, everyone, to join us on October 5th for our technical webinar with the City of Bogotá, expanding Bogotá's legacy of sustainable transport towards a fully accessible city. Since we're talking about legacy, I think this is the perfect webinar so we can land in more specific topics. And you can find more information on itdp.org's event page. And now we leave you with two videos prepared by the City of Bogotá on bus electrification and development of cycle lanes. There were some questions around cycle lanes and cycle infrastructure. So we leave you with these videos, and we hope you enjoyed the session, and see you at the next event. Thank you so much.
Bogotá dio un salto histórico hacia el futuro con la adquisición de 1.485 buses eléctricos zonales para el Sistema Integrado de Transporte Público de la ciudad, proyecto que inició en 2019 y que contó con una inversión de 8,45 billones de pesos entre provisión y operación por 15 años, para mejorar la calidad de vida de los bogotanos. Con esto se benefician más de 1,5 millones de usuarios de distintas edades, etnias y condición socioeconómica que utilizan el sistema diariamente, principalmente en las zonas de Suba, Fontibón, Perdomo y Usme, y que pertenecen a los estratos 1, 2, 3 y 4. Los buses traen grandes ventajas como mejorar la oferta de transporte para acceder al componente troncal de Transmilenio, reducción del costo de viaje para poblaciones de bajos recursos con transbordos a 0 pesos, reducción de contaminación auditiva, y mayor seguridad y transmisión de datos en tiempo real. Pero no es solo eso, también se benefician los cerca de 8 millones de bogotanos con un aire más limpio. En comparación con buses con estándar de emisión Euro 2, con los 1.485 buses eléctricos cero emisiones, se evita la emisión de 30 toneladas de material particulado y 155.000 toneladas de CO2 cada año, y contribuye a reducir los costos médicos asociados a enfermedades respiratorias en 18.000 millones de pesos. Además, ayuda a contrarrestar el cambio climático. Con estos 1.485 buses eléctricos, Bogotá se consolida como referente en Colombia y el mundo en transporte sostenible en términos de calidad del aire, mitigación del cambio climático y tecnologías de cero emisiones.
Una ciclorruta para nosotros los ciclistas significa que por fin nos están dando un espacio en la vía como vehículos, como conductores. Tenemos también derecho como los carros, como las motos y los peatones.
Esta ciclovía me parece muy buena porque podemos transitar con tranquilidad hacia nuestros trabajos.
Pues créeme que un tiempo para acá con lo de la pandemia he venido integrándome al sistema de ciclovías y una alternativa muy positiva, tanto para la salud como para el ambiente y para la sociedad.
Ya no estamos a favor de qué pasa con el camión, con el carro, que estaba uno antes como muy cerca a los automóviles, sino que ya tenemos un espacio propio para movilizarnos.
La ciclorruta es seguridad para todos, o sea, yo no creo que los conductores bogotanos quieran atropellar ciclistas, yo sé que los ciclistas no quieren estar debajo de un carro. Entonces esto es seguridad para todos.
Me economizo como 15 minutos por la otra ciclorruta que venía, porque yo venía por la Cali y la 26, pero aquí por la 68 es súper rápido.
Cuando usamos la bici sí mejoramos la movilidad, le damos espacio en el transporte público a otras personas que no la pueden utilizar y obviamente descongestionamos al bajarnos del carro o de usar un taxi y usamos estas vías que pues pueden caber muchas más personas que los vehículos que caben y no hacemos transporte.